The Bible foretells of a soon coming time when Jesus Christ will return to this earth as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. At that time, the knowledge of God will cover the whole earth as the waters cover the sea. On today's program, we will examine a major sign Jesus Christ gave of when he would return to this earth. The Trumpet Daily.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the program. The world today is convulsing in very dangerous and dramatic developments and events. Many people wonder, are we living in the last days? Your Bible says that in the time of the end, the world would be engulfed in cataclysmic events that would threaten the life of every person on earth. And then Jesus Christ will return. So what is the pivotal sign that we are living in the very last days? And could it be possible that the major sign that Jesus Christ is about to return has already been fulfilled? We'll begin our study today in Isaiah chapter 40. Get your Bible, please, and read along with me and see how so many of these prophecies that we'll cover today, they're very similar. They all tie together. They're all connected to the return of Jesus Christ. The first verse here, Isaiah 40 and verse 3, it says, "The voice of him that cries in the wilderness, prepare you the way of the eternal, make straight in the desert a highway for our God." Notice it refers to a voice, singular. Well, actually, you can read through and study this prophecy and see that it's actually talking about more than one voice. But we're going to focus in on one voice from one era of God's church. A voice crying in the wilderness. That's what the prophet Isaiah said. This is a now prophecy. It's for our time today. It's for the last days. And you can see, if you keep reading, verses 4 and 5, it says, "Every valley shall be exalted, and every mountain and hill shall be made low, and the crooked shall be made straight, and the rough places plain. And the glory of the eternal shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the eternal has spoken it." You can see this voice comes on the scene, cries out in the wilderness, a wilderness of religious confusion, as Herbert Armstrong used to say, and it leads right into the wonderful world tomorrow. It's tied directly to the return of Jesus Christ. Look at verse 10. It says, "Behold, the eternal God will come with strong hand, and his arm shall rule for him. Behold, his reward is with him, and his work before him. The eternal will come with a strong hand," it says there. And so you see how this prophecy, as I say, it's tied together with the return of Jesus Christ. Now look at the prophet Malachi. This is the last book in the Old Testament, Malachi chapter 3. And again, this is an end-time prophecy. Now, there is some duality to this prophecy, as I'll note here in just a second. But this is Malachi 3, verse 1. It says, "Behold, I will send my messenger, and he," singular, notice that, "he shall prepare the way before me, and the eternal whom you seek shall suddenly come to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant." So two messengers. The one, of course, referring to Jesus Christ, the messenger of the covenant. But it says that before that, I'll send a messenger, and he, singular, will prepare the way before me, before Jesus Christ. So there was one who would come and prepare the way for Jesus Christ in the first century, at his first coming. And of course, that was John the Baptist. But this is talking primarily about the second coming. And you can see it if you just keep reading. Look at verse 2. It says, "But who may abide the day of his coming?" That's speaking of Christ's coming. Which one? The first time or the second coming? Well, it says, "And who shall stand when he appears? For he's like a refiner's fire and like fuller's soap." This is talking about the second coming, when Jesus Christ comes, and it's like a refiner's fire. He comes and he purges the earth, or he cleanses the world of all of its impurities. That's not what he did at his first coming. The first time he came as that lamb sacrifice. Now that too was prophesied. But he said to his disciples, if I go, I'm coming again. And the next time that he comes, it's going to be like a refiner's fire. Look one page over, Malachi chapter 4. This is right at the end of the Old Testament. You see the last two verses here, verse 5. It says, behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And he, here again, singular, he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. This is obviously an end-time prophecy. The time setting here is the day of the Lord. Now, you can move into the Gospels and see in Luke chapter 1 and verse 17, it says point blank that John the Baptist came in the spirit and the power of Elijah. So John the Baptist was an individual man. He came to prepare the way. He came just before Jesus Christ came during the first century. And it says plainly in Luke 1 that he came in the spirit and power of Elijah. So the question is, who came in this end time? Who came in the spirit and the power of Elijah in this end time to prepare the way for the second coming of Christ? This is the pivotal sign that I'm talking to you about on today's program. The sign that Jesus Christ's return is imminent. Let me give you a quote from Malachi's message. This is my father's book, written in 1989, and it talks a lot about these end-time prophecies. All of the literature that we're going to be offering today talk about some of these prophecies that we're going through. But it says here, only one man of God is in the spotlight to prepare the church for Christ's second coming. John the Baptist came in the spirit of Elijah, but he never turned the hearts of the fathers to the children. And then further on it says he, that's the end time John, or John the Baptist, or the one that would come in the spirit and power of Elijah, would turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and prepare the way for Christ's second coming. So another servant of God would come in the end time, and he'd come in the spirit and power of Elijah. And that individual, his work, his ministry, the work that God would do through him, that would be a pivotal sign. I really want to encourage you we've never offered this booklet on the program before, a pivotal sign of the end time. All of the prophecies that we're going to be looking through today, they're discussed in this powerful little booklet, Malachi 3 and 4, which we just read, Isaiah 40. After the break, we'll go over to Matthew 17. It really and truly is a pivotal sign, and it's referred to, as you're already seeing on today's program, it's referred to in multiple prophecies, many, many prophecies. Now, we've offered these other books before, Malachi's Message and Mystery of the Ages. It talks about an end-time Elijah prophecy as early as page 8 in this book. And then you go forward into chapter 6 of the book, chapter 6 of Mystery of the Ages, the truth about the church, the true church of God. And there's a whole section in there, here again, about these end-time prophecies, pivotal prophecies, prophecies that prove we're in the very last days. Many of you, I know, probably already have copies of Mystery of the Ages and Malachi's Message. If you don't, then by all means, ask the operator for free copies of those books as well. But I know you don't have this one because this is the first time that we've offered this booklet on television here in the UK, a pivotal sign of the end time. Stay tuned. Take down the information that you need to so that you can call our operators today and request your free copy of this new booklet. We'll be right back.
The Trumpet Daily.
We recently passed the 33rd anniversary of Herbert W. Armstrong's death. He died on January 16th, 1986. He's the one who authored Mystery of the Ages, the book that talks about the end-time Elijah, or the Elijah to come. That's the way one subhead reads on page 8 of this book. And then, as I say, he talks about it at length at the end of chapter 6, toward the end of the book. That's because these are pivotal prophecies. And that's why we want you to have this other new booklet, a pivotal sign of the end time. All of these works, though, if you don't have them in your library, you need them. Because this prophecy we're talking about today, it is tied directly to the return of Jesus Christ. Now, some of you are familiar with the history of the Worldwide Church of God following the death of Herbert Armstrong and the great falling away from the truth. That too is prophesied. I'll have to save that material or those prophecies for another program. But that turning away, that falling away, like it says in 2 Thessalonians 2, that too is a sign of the imminence of the return of Christ. But God also said during that falling away that he would raise up the ruins through a remnant, a small group of people who remained faithful to the truth. And that work began with Malachi's Message, the other book that I pointed to earlier. And as it happens, we sent that booklet out, Malachi's Message, 4 years, almost to the day that Herbert Armstrong died. We assembled on January the 10th, I believe, in 1990, and packaged almost 1,000 Malachi's Messages, sent them out there in the United States to about 1,000 people, as I say, and that went out, and they received those books on or around January the 16th, 1990. From the very beginning of this work, the work that sponsors this program, you've had a focus on that anniversary, on Herbert Armstrong and his ministry, on Mystery of the Ages. Now I want to take you through a prophecy here in Matthew 16, actually Matthew 17, but we'll start at the last verse of Matthew 16. First, one quote here from Malachi's Message, my father's book. It says, "The one predominant issue for God's people in the end time revolves around a modern-day Elijah. He restored all things," and he references Matthew 17. We'll go through that here in just a minute. It says, if we know God, the Bible, and where God's church is, then it's easy to find Elijah. These are pivotal prophecies, and yet you don't hear them discussed. You watch any of the religious programs on TV today, nobody talks about this. And yet these are prophecies that Jesus himself uttered. We'll see it here in Matthew 17. So much detail. And he tells his disciples, now you better know who this is. Or you certainly better be familiar with this prophecy and study it and dig into it. That's why we want for you to order the free material today. Pivotal prophecy. Look at Matthew 16. Here in verse 28, it says, "Verily I say unto you, there be some standing here which shall not taste of death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." So these disciples, this is Jesus Christ with his disciples, and he's telling them that some of you are going to see the kingdom of God in a vision, obviously, and it continues on with that vision in chapter 17. So they actually got to peer into the coming kingdom. It says in the first part of chapter 17, "And after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John," so these are the ones who saw it, John his brother, and he brought them up into a high mountain and was transfigured before them, and his face did shine as the sun, and his raiment was white as light. So Peter, James, and John, they got this extraordinary look at Jesus Christ in his future glory, the glory that he's to have when he returns to this earth. His second coming, when he comes, remember, as that refiner's fire, purifying the earth of all of its sins and transgressions, ridding it of all of its impurities. That's coming at the second coming. So here he is, pictured in all of his fiery brilliance. You can read Revelation 1 sometime and see Jesus Christ described there as a being, a spirit being whose face shines like the sun. Read through that entire chapter sometime. That's Revelation 1. Staying here in Matthew 17. Verse 3 says, "And behold, there appeared unto them Moses and Elijah talking with them." Luke's account of this transfiguration explains that Moses and Elijah appeared in glory. So you have Christ and his glorified brilliance, and then you have Moses and Elijah. Again, this is projecting ahead into the kingdom when these two will be resurrected to spirit life. And then they too will have this glorious appearance, glorified God beings, just as it talks about in Romans 8. If we suffer together with Christ, we're going to be glorified together with him. That's the incredible human potential for mankind. We have plenty of other material that tells you all you need to know about that. But let's keep focused here. Verse 4, it says, Then answered Peter and said unto Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you will, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for you, and one for Moses, and one for Elias, or Elijah. While he yet spoke, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them all. And behold, a voice out of the cloud, which said, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear you him. Hear my Son. Hear what my Son has to say. This now is God the Father. Here comes this dazzling cloud overshadowing all of them, blinding light, and God the Father thundering out of the cloud. This is my beloved Son, Jesus Christ, that is. Hear him. Listen to him. Listen to the prophecies he's about to utter. You better key in on this. Notice verse 6, And when his disciples heard it, they fell on their face and were sore afraid. They were shaken by this. The power and the might of Almighty God. What a vision. What a transfiguration. To see the kingdom in all of its glory. Well, continuing on, verse 7, it says, And Jesus came and touched them and said, Arise and be not afraid. And when they lifted up their eyes, they saw no man save Jesus only. And as they came down from the mountain, so the vision ends, the transfiguration ends, it says Jesus charged them, saying, Tell the vision to no man until the Son of Man be risen again from the dead. After my resurrection, then go ahead and tell everyone. But for now, just keep it quiet. It says, And the disciples asked him, saying, notice this, verse 10. The disciples asked him, saying, Why then say the scribes that Elijah must first come? So they receive this vision of the kingdom. And Jesus says, now don't tell anyone about it until after my resurrection. And immediately the disciples asked him, so then why do the disciples, or why do the scribes say that Elijah must first come before this kingdom, before the second coming of Jesus Christ? Notice how it's tied directly to the second coming, this prophesied Elijah, and the return of Jesus Christ. Notice what Christ says. Verse 11, And Jesus answered and said to them, Elias, or Elijah truly, shall first come and restore all things. Now what's important to note here is that the first Elijah, John the Baptist, remember, that's Luke 1:17, and the duality there of Malachi 3 and verse 1. The first Elijah already had come and gone, John the Baptist. And Jesus says here, Elijah truly shall first come. So there's a duality here, remember? Malachi 3:1. It's talking about 2 messengers. Well, there's one messenger referred to, but it's dual. There was one messenger to prepare the way for his first coming, and then one messenger to prepare the way for the second coming. And Jesus tells his disciples, he says that Elijah shall first come. And what's he going to do? He's going to restore all things. Restore all things. Now, John the Baptist didn't do that. John the Baptist didn't turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and vice versa. He didn't come with this family vision, not like Herbert Armstrong in this end time. Read Mystery of the Ages and prove it for yourself. The God family vision. Mr. Armstrong thundered away at that, and he restored all things. What does that mean? Well, if you get this new booklet, a pivotal sign of the end time. The second half of this booklet goes through all of these pivotal doctrines. The true doctrines of God's true church. And you'll see as you study through this booklet just how unique and special those doctrines are. They're not taught in the traditional Christian denominations of this world. No, they're not. And yet, if you study into those doctrines, this is sort of a summary of it all, but it then points you to probably 20 or 30 other booklets or books that you can study to prove that those doctrines that have been restored to God's church, that they come right out of the Bible. They come right out of your Bible. Prove it. Prove me wrong. If you don't think I'm telling you the truth, at least face it yourself and prove all things, like Paul said in 1 Thessalonians 5:21. See if what I'm telling you is the truth or not. That's what you want to do. You can't just take my word for it either. You have to prove it for yourself. Verse 12 it says, "But I say unto you that Elijah is come already." So verse 11 he says Elijah shall come. Then he says in verse 12, now Elijah has come already. What does he mean by that? Well, John the Baptist had come already, the first one, the first Elijah. Well, the first to come in the spirit of Elijah. Of course, you can go back far into the Old Testament and get to the original Elijah, Elijah the prophet. But then one would come in the first century in the spirit and power of Elijah. John the Baptist did that. He did come. He had come already, and they knew him not. Notice that. That's verse 12. They didn't know him. Here he was prophesied to come, and most people didn't even know. They didn't even know it when he was right there in their midst. Could that happen again in this end time? Because there's an end time Elijah that's prophesied to come as well. Is it possible that he's already come and gone and that people didn't even recognize it? That people didn't even realize it? That they knew him not? Well, look at what's happened. Look at what happened in the first century. Look at what verse 13 says. Then the disciples understood that he spoke unto them of John the Baptist. So the disciples knew. He says there is a prophesied Elijah to come. He shall come. And then he says, now there was one that's come already. And they knew. The disciples knew he was talking about John the Baptist. So it is possible for you as a disciple of Christ to know who fulfilled this end time prophecy. Let me take you to Malachi's message. This is my father's book. Mr. Armstrong said he fulfilled the Elijah role. Most WCG members heard him say that. Mr. DeKoch, that's the one who succeeded Mr. Armstrong, heard and agreed when Mr. Armstrong was alive and shortly after his death, but not now. You see, all of this changed just a few years after Mr. Armstrong died. And then they started saying, oh, these prophecies, they don't mean what we always knew them to mean. They changed it. They just dismissed, they set aside these pivotal doctrines, these pivotal prophecies. It says the big issue in this subject is Christ said an end-time Elijah would come and restore all things. We just read it. You read it for yourself if you're reading along with me. Elijah, it says, Herbert Armstrong did come. Now, if we deny that, we're calling Christ a liar. Maybe you need to study further just to see for yourself what God did through Herbert Armstrong, what Herbert Armstrong restored. If you're new to this program, some of this is, I'm sure, very new and even surprising to you. But we do have material, plenty of it, that can bring you right up to speed. If you look at chapter 6, I mentioned page 8 early on in this book about the Elijah to come. You fast forward to chapter 6, Mr. Armstrong goes through a lot of the same passages, or at least references them, that we've gone through on today's program. Malachi 3, Malachi 4, Luke 1, verse 17, Matthew 17. He also touches on Matthew 24 and verse 14. I'll leave that to you to go and study. But he says at the end of chapter 6, these prophecies have been fulfilled. Have been. See, God sent. He sent someone to this earth in these latter days to come in the spirit and the power of Elijah to restore all things, to bring a family vision, a family message, and to prepare the way for Jesus Christ's return. That has happened. Let's see how much time we have left to just go back to Malachi 4. Malachi 4 and verse 4. It says here, remember you the law of Moses, my servant, which I commanded unto him at Horeb for all Israel with the statutes and judgments. Here the admonition is from Malachi the prophet, you better remember, you better go back and know your history. And this is fairly recent history. It's been 33 years, yes. It's been about a generation, but still, it's not that far back. And if you're willing to go back and to dig into this truth, you can know and understand everything that you need to about this pivotal prophecy. Verses 5 and 6 again, as we read earlier, I'll send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. It's happened, and this booklet proves it. Make sure that you request this free booklet, a pivotal sign of the end time. One last quote here. Those who fail to rally around Mr. Armstrong and his God family instructions won't be in God's kingdom. Now more than ever is the time to rally around Mr. Armstrong and his teachings, particularly Mystery of the Ages. And then we have these other special works to help you, to give you a supplement to the study, a pivotal sign of the end time. Make sure that you call our operators today and request all of this free material. Thank you for joining us on today's program, and we'll see you next time.